As the church boy and the church girl that you are, it's not unusual to find yourself in a mix where you are heavily committed in church, also heavily efficient at work. And that means there's always going to be a pile of work waiting on your desks on either of these fronts. And it will not be unusual to have experienced a situation where on a Friday you are out for a video, on Saturday you are out for an evangelism or a church meeting, on Sunday there is a lunch service, and on Monday you're back to work and you're wondering where all the weekend went to. Now, if you've ever asked yourself, how do I become more effective at being a servant of God or serving in God's vineyard, and also continuing to represent Him at the highest level at my workplace, then this particular episode is going to be very, very useful for you. Okay, my name is Dami Oguntunde, and welcome to the Faith and Culture Podcast. So how do you balance your commitment at work with your commitment in church? Especially if you're a church boy, you love God, church girl, you love God, you would like to be in God's presence, you like to serve in God's vineyard with all your talents and your skills as much as possible. And then, like my mom said, the reward for good work is more work. So if you're very efficient at work and at church, the likelihood that it will pile a lot more work on your desk is high because you are good at what you do, and then more work will keep coming on the strength of your past track record. And if you work in some industries where there are blocks of months where they are called peak periods, and you have to do a lot more than the usual months in those specific months, the tendency that you will burn out and you will fall ill is very high because you're sort of burning on both ends. You're doing a lot more at work, you're doing a lot more in church as well, and you're not able to balance things. And perhaps you would also feel guilty for relegating church activities or delegating it to someone else. And so you're wondering, how exactly should you navigate this terrain of balancing your work life with your church commitments as well? And this also leads to the idea of work-life balance, which I particularly have an issue with. All right, the idea of work-life balance suggests that while you are working, you're not living, and while you are living, you're not working. And so that is also where the whole idea of TGIF came from. So you're working from Monday to Friday, and then Fridays, thank God it's Friday because of the hope of enjoyment on Friday night and on Saturday and the rest on Sunday, and then you can resume to work on Monday. And I think that sort of does a lot of damage. Work does not have to be a departure from life, and life does not have to be a departure from work. Okay, the very first thing God gave man to do was to work, and that didn't mean that man stopped living once he started working. So if we agree with the idea that we're only working for 5 days and living for maybe 2 odd days, then clearly less than 20% of your life is spent not even enjoying the fullness of your life, because you're only living for less than 20% of your entire life and working and slaving away, burning your candles at both ends for the major part of your life. And I don't think that is God's plan for humanity. Work is supposed to be part of your life, and life is supposed to be part of your work. It's a merger. You mustn't separate. And I realize that when you separate these two things, you're not able to even accommodate a lot more. You're not able to live a fuller life. All right, when you begin with self. So what happens to your marital life as well? Are you also going to create a separate time to be married and to be a father and to be a pastor if you're one? We have one life, and we must learn how to use the wisdom of God to understand how to manage all our competing needs and demands with the wisdom of God, which is why we've come up with this episode. So how do you manage all your competing needs within the context of your limited supply of time? Nobody has more supply of time than another person, but we all have all kinds of work schedules spiraling out of control, and we are unable to handle that level of tension. Okay, so the first thing I like to say here is to understand what balance truly means. Balance is not, aggregating all your specific competing needs and then allocating your time across those competing needs equally. It is not allocating equal time to all your competing needs. That is not balance. If that's your idea of balance, that is not balance, it is chaos. If that's your idea of balance, you will most likely have a lot of things out of control, because, balance is not a matter of allocating the same exact portion of time to all competing needs. Balance is understanding priority. That is what balance is. Think of it as a bucket that you're trying to fill up with as many stones as possible, and these stones are various sizes and dimensions. Some are big, some are small, some are medium sized, and you have one bucket. So that bucket is like your time for the day. That is, it captures all the time that you have, and then the stones are like the tasks that you have to get done, and you have a limited amount of time to achieve all of these tasks. Now, what people think is balance is allocating equal time to all their competing needs. So what they will do most likely is they'll just attempt to fit all the stones into the bucket at the same time, and the likelihood is that the smaller stones and pebbles will find their way into the bucket really fast, and then the bigger stones have nowhere to go because all the smaller activities took the bulk of the space. All right, imagine you put the small stones in there first, and then the big stones don't have the time to find their way into the bucket, and then you see that by the next day you have a lot of high priority tasks that you couldn't achieve the previous day because you paid attention to low profile tasks. You didn't pay attention to the most important priority tasks. Okay, so balance is understanding how to put weight on tasks. Okay, understanding what is important, what is not as important, what can wait, what can be deferred, what is urgent, and all of these very important frameworks. You can find some of these things in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, where he talks about the 4 quadrants, important, urgent, not important, not urgent, but there's a very impressive framework that he puts out, and I think that framework can be really, really useful. When you prioritize, when you put a weight on important tasks, then you can put the big stones in the buckets first. Put the big stones in the bucket. That means all the big stones find their way into the base of the bucket one way or another because you put priority on them. You do them first. Then you put the medium-sized stones that can sit comfortably on top of the big stones. Then you find all those little pebbles. If you pour them into the bucket, those little pebbles can still find their way down into the bucket because there's nothing that is stopping them from floating into the small cracks and spaces within the bucket, because the big stones are going to create some little gaps here and there within the bucket, and then the small stones can still find their way into the bucket. At the end of the day, you would have filled the bucket with all the stones you had at the beginning of the day because you prioritized the big and important tasks first. Now, I know that this may not be as simplistic in application, but the principle and the illustration is very, very powerful. That means the moment you begin to put a lot more priority on the most important tasks in your life, whether church or work, you have the capacity to actually attend to most of the important and less important and even the least important tasks eventually because you placed priority. And perhaps the genius in that principle is the fact that you put your freshest energy, your most alert self onto the grind, doing your most important tasks, so you're able to achieve them a lot faster and even save up a little more time so that you can do all the other things, which if you had reversed the process by putting all your fresh energy and your alertness into the least important tasks, then by the time you're going into the most important things, you are less energetic, and these tasks are now very important, and so those two things cannot combine because important tasks require a lot of energy and attention, and you don't have as much attention to pay on these important tasks, and so you will most likely have to shift that important task till the next day when you're a bit fresher. And that is how people waste time and procrastinate and keep moving things to the next day, things that they could otherwise have done today. Procrastination, someone says, is a kind of pride. It's almost like you taking the provision of God's time for you today for granted. You are assuming that God has a sort of commitments to you to give you that exact same time tomorrow. How about you do today what is meant for today and stop taking the grace of God that He has given you today for granted? And that means you pay attention to the most important things first and foremost, and then cascade down the priority list and continue to do those tasks till your day wound up. And if you're not able to do some of the least important things, no big deal, you don't lose much because they're not as important in the first place anyways. The most important things have been done. If you understand balance like this, most likely you will be finding yourself running from pillar to post, trying to scamper around to balance your overflowing desks of deliverables. I hope you understand what I just shared. So this is what balance really is about. It is not allocating equal time to competing needs. It is understanding the priority levels or weights that should be attached to each task and then paying as much attention to the degree of each level of priority. That's clear, right? Now, let's begin to talk about the 3 major things you can begin to do, all right, to better balance your work both at church and then your workplace. I already inferred one, all right, in my explanation of the word balance. but I have to go back there, which is learn to prioritize your tasks. That's the first thing. Learn to prioritize your tasks. Now, without a very good sense of discernment and judgment, which comes only by wisdom, you really can't learn how to prioritize things. Everything looks urgent on the surface. You understand? And when you attend to urgent things all the time, it's a sign that there's no wisdom at work in your life. When people can just barge into your day, create a sense of urgency, an artificial sense of urgency, and you fall along with them because you assume that everything that is urgent is important, it's a sign that you didn't have a plan for your day. Most people like that, they get on a bandwagon that somebody else took them on and then come back to their task staring at them, and they were not able to achieve because somebody took them on a journey that they had not planned into their day from the beginning of their day in the first place. And so you need to learn to prioritize your time, and that means you need to allocate time to planning your next day, planning your next week. You need to allocate time to it. See the level of dexterity and detail that God put into the creation of the universe. See the level of wisdom. He didn't create the animals and the monkeys and the trees before he created light. Because imagine he had done all those things and then he created light. He would have created light to the entire mess that he had created, because he would have worked in darkness. So you must understand the prioritization, some things that needs to come first. All right, for those who work in building industry, interior designers, architects, builders, they understand the power of the work schedule. How that not everything can be the thing you start the work with. Some things only come after some things have been done. Some things can be done simultaneously, but some things cannot even start until some other things are finished first. And so they need to have that work schedule. In fact, it's a major deliverable for people within the building space, because without that, you have absolutely no idea how to organize your resources, allocate them, whether that is personnel resources or financial resources or energy levels or the timing with which you will schedule those tasks. It is extremely important, but a lot of people don't pay attention to prioritizing, planning their day. They don't plan their day ahead of time, and so by the time they're in the day, they're trying to just camp around and figure out how to behave and how to allocate resources, and it's by that time already late. Imagine yourself as an eagle who is at the top of a mountain, seeing how the entire landscape of the jungle is. If you stay on that mountain and you see the entire landscape of the jungle, and then on the strength of your understanding of the perspective, come into the forest, you are able to better navigate with hindsight. You're able to better navigate with some perspective that is superior to those who didn't have that perspective before coming down into the forest. When you go into your day without going up the mountain to see what the landscape of your day is going to look like, you are bound to be running from pillar to post, trying to reserve energy, and you're just doing a lot. You're always doing, but you're not achieving so much because you didn't provide yourself perspective. That is what planning does. It gives you perspective, and it is that perspective that then helps you prioritize. And these things are a function of wisdom. You know why I said so? Because it is only by wisdom you would understand honor, and it is in honor you would understand differences. And it is when you understand differences, you can put some tasks as number one, some tasks as number two, some tasks as number three, and all of those things like that. If you plan your day, for example, a day before, there are times that you would have some extra time to do some work-based deliverables, even at work, because you had already envisaged and planned that time ahead of time. Imagine, of course, you get to work, you do a lot of your work because that's the priority for that morning. You do all your work responsibilities, and then you have a little bit of extra time for 2 hours. Then you're able to quickly recap that video from pastor's sermon on Sunday because you work in the buzz unit of the church or the media department, and you're able to quickly edit that because you were efficient with the most relevant tasks of that day, and then some extra time opened up to you. You understand my point? I'm not saying you should abuse the time that your employers are giving to you, but if it's a deliverable-based work environment, then it is clear that it is the deliverables that is most important, and then you prioritize the deliverables. And if you're efficient at that, some extra time would open up to you, and we're able to allocate those times to other competing needs like church work. And that is clear. So prioritizing and understand the logic, the systems of prioritization, and being disciplined at it is a very powerful tool to ensuring that you're not burning out or thinning out at the end of a particular period of significant workload. Number two is learn to say no. Okay, a lot of people have not learned to say no. Okay, someone comes with a task, you do it. Another person comes with another task, you do it. And because of that, you will eventually lose your integrity. And this is what happens, especially when you look at, some of the artisan spaces in our country today, especially tailors and fashion designers. You tell them, I need this clothes by next week, and they tell you, of course, I used to deliver. I'm very, very quick. I will do this in 3 days. And then 3 weeks, you are still waiting for your clothes. Why? Because the same way they promised you 3 days, they promised 20 other people 3 days. And they were never able to allocate their time across those competing needs equally. And then everybody's asking them for their clothes at the same time. And they totally lose their integrity because they did not even know how to say, if you need your clothes next week, I'm sorry, I will not have the time. I'm already doing some work right now that may take 2 extra weeks. And so if you are willing to wait for 4 weeks, that's fine. I'll try to make it 3 weeks, but I can't deliver it in any less than 3 weeks. If you're not able to read that clear communication of your capacity, it shows you've not been examining and assessing your capacity vis-a-vis your workload over time. And it also shows that you will soon erode all the levels of trust and integrity you have in the marketplace, with your neighbors, with your friends, with your clients, because you're always over-promising and under-delivering. That means you must be comfortable receiving the amount of work that is consistent with the amount of time that you have based on your efficiency levels over time. If you do this particular task, it takes you 2-3 days to do it. Why are you taking 5 of it and promising the exact same 3 days to deliver to all 5? It will take you 15 days at least to deliver to all 5. And those 15 days will have to be cascaded. It can be at the same time. Do you understand? So those 5 people cannot receive their tasks at the same time. One person will receive it first, the allotment the first 3 days, and on and on like that. And this is the whole idea of employing people in the workplace, so that by the time you employ someone, you are able to optimize that time and maybe churn out a lot more within the exact same 3 days over time. And you need to learn. I can't go into any of the details around, operations management and optimizing your, especially if you run a very massive organization or a massive, operation, wherever it is you work, whether it is personally in your own personal work life or you have a business, a full-blown business. There are a lot of things that you can learn on how to ensure that there's optimization of key resources and key materials to ensure that you deliver the highest level of productivity. But on a general sense, okay, you must learn to say no, and you can't say no if you don't understand capacity first, because you need to understand what you're able to do within a particular period of time. That way you know when something is entering tipping point. You can tell. And it's totally fine to also tell your HODs at church that I'm not sure I'm going to deliver this within this particular time. It's not wrong. It's not a sin. It is you having a very good understanding of your work schedule, of your commitments, because if you don't understand how to say no or how to delay deliverables so that you can already tell your line manager this is when you can expect it, because there are 2 things involved. If I'm going to accept your task, I'm going to elongate your time. It's either I say no outrightly so you can give somebody, especially if you are more committed to the time than the quality factor. So if you want me to do this job because you trust my quality, then you have to give me extra time. You can't not give me time and also insist on the same quality that I deliver. It doesn't work. You have to compromise at some point. So if I compromise on accepting your task, then you also have to compromise on delaying the deliverable. So if I can't take on that pressure of accepting to do this job at the same quality you're familiar with, and also deliver at the exact same time, because it takes time to deliver quality. So if I have to deliver both quality and time at the same time, speed, quality to you, I suffer on both ends. I really have to compromise on anything. And that's not a good use of your negotiation skills. You must be able to negotiate better timelines for deliverables, all right? Because you're not likely going to be able to, under deliver in terms of quality, because your name is attached to it. So you can't ever really downplay the quality of what you're going to be able to deliver, but you can negotiate the time factor. And if someone is not comfortable with the time factor, then by all means it's a rule. Then they should take it to someone who is faster than you, but hopefully the person can also be as qualitative as you as well. All right. And the fact, maybe the person has a lot more systems at work to deliver the exact same job at a quicker time. The likelihood is that the person will be more expensive. You understand? The idea is this: you need to learn to say no. Alright, so then you learn to say no based on your understanding and assessment of your workload and your schedule. It's because you have a clear understanding of what you're capable of doing. So when you learn to say no, you are able to actually commit to your commitments. When people say yes all the time, they really don't mean any of them, because over time people realize that your yes doesn't mean anything because you're not able to commit to the things you said you will do. because you collected a lot of yeses and you were not able to deliver on any of them, or just a few of them you were able to deliver on. And it gives you a bad name. It reduces your integrity, erodes your trust, and then eventually the reason why you even said yes in the first place is defeated. But when you learn to say no and say yes to only the things you're able to accommodate, then you are able to actually deliver on your commitments, and then your yes will actually mean something because your no is powerful enough. I hope that's clear. The last thing here is learn to be efficient. So number one, learn to prioritize. Number two, learn to say no. And number three, learn to be efficient. You see, because you're efficient at what you do, you will become faster at it. Okay? So, like I said, if you are good at what you do, more work will come to your desk. And if it's in a business context, more work is a good thing, because that's more money. All right, and then that's more expansion, and then that's more employment, and that's more revenue, that's more profit, and that's the whole idea. And that's why businesses are constantly racing against, optimization, or ensuring that they're maximizing all the resources at their disposal to generate the maximum kind of value and productivity at all times. So in your own unique personal context, okay, the things you do, ensure that you are getting more and more efficient at it. So that will typically take you 2 hours, perhaps when you started that skill, let it start taking you maybe 45 minutes, because you have done it over time. Don't get stuck in a particular time allocation. Continue to get more efficient, because the more you get efficient, that is actually expanding your time for you. That means the things you could only do in 5 hours before, you can now do them in 1.5 hours, and then what would take 24 hours can now take perhaps 6 hours. That's powerful. That means what you typically be able to achieve in 1 week, you can now achieve it in 2 days. That's what efficiency can do. Efficiency can make you expand. It's like elasticating time. You are able to pack a lot more into time. I have observed that it is not church commitments that makes people burn out. Okay? It is a lack of efficiency. It's a lack of prioritization, and it is the lack of this resilience to get jobs done quick enough. Because I have observed that at the highest level of church growth and church organization are people who are also extremely efficient at work. The PowerPoint Lab is a very candid example, it's a very good example. All our pastors work 9 to 5, all of them, and all of them are very efficient at their workplaces, evidenced by promotions and great stuff happening in their lives. And they are the most committed, give or take, by and large, within the context of the church as well. And it's the exact same 24 hours we all have. Now, I'm not a standard, but I'm an example. And I'm going to show you how in 1 year, all the things I was able to achieve, especially last year, it shocks me myself, because that is actually how grace works. Remember, in one of my episodes, I shared about how that grace looks like labor. A lot of us relegate grace to just forgiveness of sins. What grace should actually do is to help us achieve a lot more in record time. The year 2023 was by far and large the most incredibly busiest period of my life. In that 1 year, right, we welcomed twins into our family. A set of twins, 2 girls, that's 3 children, all at once. Well, of course, I can't say without preparation, because I knew about 6 months ahead of time. However, reaching the complexity, how much I need to give to accommodate that significant change in my family life, that was significant. In the same year, where I work, we released multiple products that needed a lot of follow-up and a lot of hard work that was there. And then I started my MBA the same way last year, sometime in January. So the entire year was already blocked out for MBA. Every week I had modules I had to do. I mean, the exact same way I ran my longest teaching series ever, about 44 installments of the Royal Series, Realm of Wisdom. That same year, the church moved venues from where we used to be at Fadi to where we currently are now at Anthony. The same year. And that didn't reduce my commitments to speaking engagement, to off-the-cuff, conversations with friends, to meetings, to engagements. My point is, that didn't necessarily remove all the other commitments from being pressing. Everything was still pressing, and somehow, by the help of God, I was able to achieve all my goals in record time. And in that same way, I started writing a book that my best goals this year I should be publishing. All of that in 1 year. I didn't reduce my commitment in church. I couldn't even reduce my commitment in family front. I was still husband to my wife, father to my children, pastor to my members. CFO to my company, friends to my friends, and the 7 commitments that were there, and I didn't burn out in the sense of falling ill. I had to take a retreat at some point towards the end of the year. But I didn't burn out, I didn't fall ill. God supplied all the grace required. And it's on the strength of these 3 principles that I'm sharing with you that I was able to navigate the complexity of my 2023. And that's a microcosm of what is possible, especially in your life as well. So don't lay the excuse and the charge and the door of church commitment and say it is the church that is taking all my time. No, you need to be more efficient at prioritizing your time, saying no to commitments you're not able to really deliver on, and then be quicker at delivering tasks so that you can expand the elasticity of your time. When you're efficient, people can give you more commitments, and more commitments, whether it's at church and work front, is more valuable. It means you are more valuable. At work, it's more money, it's more promotion, it's more leadership, it's more opportunities to travel, it's more opportunities to be a blessing at work and to be blessed as well. In church, it is more value, it is more impact, it's more blessing, it's more service, it's more leveling the saints. It is more serving God as a co-laborer in his vineyard. So never give the excuse that it is church work that is not making you efficient at work, or it is work that is not making you efficient at church. We as a church, for example, at PowerPoint 5, we're an example that if our pastors are just as efficient at work as they are in church, then the challenge really is not the commitments at both fronts. It is the people involved particularly. Okay, and you can become that extremely efficient disciple of God who is an excellent person both at church and then both at work. That's the ultimate objective of this episode. It is not to excuse you from actually taking a lot more at church, because taking a lot more at church is making you more valuable to God and to his people. And I'm not going to say you shouldn't do that. By all means do that and do more of that if you have the time. And that doesn't also mean you relinquish or you jettison your commitment and your competence at work either. As a matter of fact, I realized that these things become very symbiotic at some point. Your efficiency at work actually plays out in making you a better person at work. And your efficiency at work makes you more valuable at church. If you don't see them as 2 separate entities, but find a way to organize your time across those 2 fronts of commitment, you will become exponentially more valuable to each of those 2 fronts, much more than you've ever been before now. If you find this useful, ensure that you like, you comment, you share, and you can also comment down there in the comment section. Perhaps I could pick up some of your suggestions as subsequent episodes and topics to speak about. Alright, also subscribe to this channel for notifications for subsequent episodes. Alright, once again, this is Daniel Ogun today, signing out.